Hi guys, it's Popcorn Therapy. I'm Julie Peters. I'm a therapist, a tarot reader, and I do a few other things. I want to let you know that my new book, Maiden Warrior Mother Crone, is now available wherever you get books. It is released, so you can get it immediately. It's a really, I think, wonderful compilation of stories about goddesses and divine feminine figures from all over the world, exploring those archetypes of maiden, warrior, mother, and crone. So traditionally, you'd get maiden, mother, crone, and I've got warrior in there, which is has its own things to say about power and femininity and things like that. So please check it out. I would love to share that book with you. You can now donate to me, tip me if you want for this podcast. This is just something that I'm doing as sort of a labor of love. And same for Emily and all of my other hosts. They're very graciously coming on here just for the joy of it. So if you do want to send us a donation or a tip, you can do that at juliepeters.ca/tip me. And if you decide to tip $50 or above, I will send you a little tarot reading recording just for you. So feel free to do that at any point. Please enjoy the following discussion with me and Emily about Materialists. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Popcorn Therapy. Welcome back, Emilee Nimetz, who's here with me today to talk about The Materialists by Celine song. And I think we're also probably going to be talking a little bit about Past Lives, Celine Song's other film, because I feel like you can't help but compare the two. So these two movies, Past Lives and Materialists, are about love and maybe some other things too that we'll get into. But from a love perspective, I feel like I want to situate you and me, because I was kind of thinking, I'd love to talk to you about this. And also we have such different experiences in terms of love and dating and where we're at and all of those things. So for me, I'm a suburban mom who's happily married to an ex-boyfriend, I guess. We met when we were in school together in Montreal, and we're together, broke up, stayed friends, got back together, broke up again, like that whole thing, and ended up getting married and having two kids together. And there's more to that story, obviously, but that's sort of where I'm at. So I've chosen someone to marry, to like enter into the business deal of marriage and having children together. And I feel like those choices are, there's a lot to them. So I don't want to tell your story for you. So Emily, why don't you say a little bit about like your context, where you're coming from in terms of love, romance, relationships?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this earlier today, like as we were prepping for the pod, and I was like, I feel like my journey of dating and relationships has gone from like I didn't really date growing up to like dating men exclusively and then coming out as a lesbian and then dating men again, being like, wait, I think I'm bisexual. Dating men seriously, and then realizing that was not the tea for me. And now I do feel like I am very more on the asexual spectrum. Like I don't really, dating and romance and relationships is not something that is a priority for me in my life. Like I am very content without it. I spent a lot of years feeling like I needed it. And, I think probably the lockdowns, which it gave me, the lockdowns were obviously complicated and difficult, but one thing that it like kind of like showed me was like, oh, I actually really enjoy my own company. I actually love not being in a relationship. And so that's kind of where I am. I occasionally dip into the the lesbian dating app. I haven't really been on like Tinder or any of the other things in a while. But Her is the one I go to get attention. If I need I just want someone to flirt with me. But it's usually very short lived. There's usually maybe banter with like one or two people. And then I just am like, ugh, and I delete the app and I just can't be bothered. So I'm kind of in a place where I'm like, yeah, I'm in my mid 30s and I just don't really want that for myself, which is a really difficult thing in this culture, this very hetero culture, that really does try to compel people to do the suburban housewife thing, you know, which is like a great thing if you're choosing it very mindfully. It can be a very problematic thing if you're not, as we've seen in the trad wife content, which is like a whole other part of this conversation. But like, yeah, I'm kind of like very happily single, queer, not really interested in dating. And, you know, I have no plans to do it. So I'm like, I feel like I'm approaching this from a very anthropological perspective again, as I enjoy, you know, these reality dating shows where I'm like, what are these heterosexuals up to? I feel like also similarly approaching these like love romance films from a similar perspective where it's like, what are these heteros up to? What are they talking about?
Yeah, so I feel like from this perspective, like the materials perspective, you and I have both been there. Like we've both dated men, even though we're both queer in different ways. But right now we're not actively so much involved in that whole process and that sort of longing that I feel like we both have related to in the past, maybe, of finding your person, finding your love, like entering into the realm of marriage or whatever it is, having kids, stuff like that. But I do feel like we both have had that experience of like not matchmaking, but like, you know, meeting someone that we met online or whatever, just the sort of realm of dating. I feel like back in my day, when I met my now husband, you know, people would meet in class, you'd meet through groups of friends, like you'd meet kind of in person. And online dating wasn't as much of a thing. It was a little bit later, like in my 20s and early 30s, I would say there was a little bit more online dating going on, but I never did a ton of it. Though I have nightmares about it. And then I have a nightmare that Rob and I are no longer together and my apps aren't working. Like trying to find someone. So I still have that anxiety, I suppose, even though, you know, here I am with it.
Tinder haunts and comes for us all.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I did a lot of online dating. Like I remember the early iterations of online dating, like Plenty of Fish, OkCupid. And so I did a lot of that and then was like exclusively using Tinder and being a bisexual on Tinder, which was how I identified at the time. Like it was, you know, you barely got a single woman come across your screen. It was almost exclusively men. And I did find that it was at that time, especially, or like maybe just my algorithm or whatever, like, you know, men would reply quicker, would say yes to dates quicker. And it's much more of a slow burn, I find, in the queer dating space. And I remember that hell of just like meeting people and all of that. And especially with the notion of like, I am going to date this person with the idea of XYZ, get into a relationship, have kids, have a marriage, you know, like those kind of pressures that are different than when you meet somebody IRL and date somebody sort of organically through community.
Yeah, totally. And I remember that too. I feel like there was an era of my life when I was trying to date bisexually, and it was so different. And there would be times when I would just only put women on there because I was like, okay, I need to filter out like all of these men, yeah, so that I can actually try to meet some women here. And it was a lot harder for sure. Yeah. It was a very different experience. And yeah, so I feel like that's how we're coming at this movie. So just quick recap in case you're listening to this and either you haven't seen it or you've forgotten how it goes. It's such a simple premise. Mm-hmm. Lucy is a matchmaker, classic trope. She's an expert who can't make it work for herself, right? And little caveat on that, I feel like Lucy doesn't necessarily want to date anyone. You don't get the sense she's super into dating. Maybe because she's been so jaded by how materialistic the dating world is. So she thinks, I'll just marry someone rich and that's just the aim that I'll have because I sort of don't believe in love, even though I'm making it happen for all of these other people. Anyway, she meets Pedro Pascal's character, Harry, who is rich, kind, respectful, thoughtful, like a unicorn, he's named in the movie. On the dating scene, he has everything that one would want. And then she has sort of a situationship with her ex-boyfriend. What was his name? Something really basic. Chris Evans' character. It was like Tom, Dick, and Harry was like what everybody was named in this movie. I feel like John. Yeah. His name was John of all things. Like, kind of wondering, John and Harry, it's like they're both sort of traditional names for men, and they're such basic names for men, like John Doe, Tom, Dick, and Harry. Like, you know, they
Yeah.
could have been anyone, is maybe a point that was being made, and maybe not. So anyway, forgotten his name already. Like
John.
Like, so forgettable. Okay, so John, Chris Evans' character, Captain America, he's a trying, I don't know about failed, but he's a trying 37-year-old actor. So he works as a caterer, and he's sort of in a play, and he's trying to make acting work, and he's living with roommates and stuff and struggling to make ends meet. And in the movie, it's basically this love triangle between the three of them. Like, which one is Lucy gonna choose? So that's the story. Maybe we can start with this question, which is, what do you think the movie was about? Or like, what do you think the message of the movie was for you?
I think for me, the movie was about how love itself is an intangible thing that is not something that can be filtered down to like defined terms. I really enjoyed listening to Celine's song on the Daily podcast where she's being interviewed and she's speaking about how it's like, you know, you can have all of these prerequisites for dating for who you want to date, but the actual experience of love is so difficult to like name and explain, and how love as a noun, as a thing that you have, is not real, but like love as a verb, as a thing that you do, is less fantastical, less dramatic. It's less like, yay, let's celebrate, you got it. It's like, it's a thing that you have to actively choose every day. So I get the sense that that is kind of, and it was helpful to listen to her speak about that, because I think I kind of got that from when I watched it, but listening to her speak about it, it's more clear that that is sort of what it's saying. I think it represents, it's a false choice for Lucy. I think that I do struggle with that. It's like the options are poor struggling actor whose life is not in a place that meshes with you, because I don't want to say anything bad about his life. I know many actors who live like that, who are that age. That is the reality, to be real for people, that is the reality of an actor trying to make it work who isn't actually Chris Evans in real life. You know, like a lot of actors have roommates, they're doing their serving jobs, they're auditioning, they're doing plays, especially if you're a theater actor, like your gigs are not paying you very much. Versus ultra wealthy, 1% wealthy, like extraordinarily kind of perfect, quote unquote, on paper. And it's like, that's not a real choice for, I know this woman is fictional, this Lucy character is fictional, but like those aren't the choices for people, right? Like you're not always looking at these extremes of like a person who is poor and whose life you hate, that you love, versus somebody who's rich and who you don't feel love for. Like that's a false choice. I think that there are also middle class people who you might love. There could also be a lot of poor people who you feel very cold towards. You could maybe even fall in love with one of these quote unquote unicorns. So I feel like I kind of struggled with that as a concept, that it's like, it does feel like it really nails down this like hetero trope of like, ladies, you stop aiming so high because you're not going to get the unicorn. And even if you do, you're not going to have any love feelings for him. You better choose Chris Evans, who sucks. Let's solve this male loneliness epidemic together, girls. And it's like, that's not like, let's not put that work on Lucy. Like, I don't know. There was probably lovely men in her who make around the same amount of money as she does, who, you know, who she might feel more connected with, and who are able to take her to a fancy dinner, or not even like ultra fancy, like Harry was able to take her to, but like, you know, the Keg, which is a Canadian restaurant chain, if you know it, like, you know, maybe that's the fancy dinner. So I don't know. It felt like a sort of extremist kind of version of this, despite it being essentially what I like to call a Hallmark for the A24 crowd. Like, let's be honest, this is a busy, career-driven woman who falls for the kind of more soulful guy. You know, he has more of a soul. So it's like, this is, let's be real, this is a Hallmark movie. It's a Hallmark movie. It is a Hallmark movie. It's a Hallmark movie. It's just gorgeously shot, and the acting is you know, very like, and
Yeah, so I've heard on the internet a few times people calling this movie broke ex-boyfriend propaganda. thought that was very funny. Because that's a little bit how I felt about it. And I really, even the more we're talking about it, like, I not only, I just sort of disliked this movie, but I feel like disappointed and betrayed by it.
Yeah.
And, you know, part of the reason for that is that I saw Past Lives by Celine Song, which is a movie that was nominated for a few awards. You know, it's known to be a really brilliant movie. And I rewatched it with my husband just the other day because he hadn't seen it, and he and I watched Materialists together, and I was just curious, like, what he would think. And man, that movie has a lot of soul. It's so beautiful. It's so sad. It's about love, but it's also about identity. It's about the choices we make in love having something to do with who we are and who we are at the time, right? That movie is such a similar triangle in that it focuses on a woman, Nora, who has immigrated from Korea when she was about 12, and she's happily married to an American when her Korean sort of sweetheart from that time comes back into her life in a certain way. And you really see her struggle around, like, the draw she has not only to him, but also to Korea, like, to who she once was. And I think that this movie is semi-autobiographical for Celine Song. And I think that in that movie, you really see very realistic choices and painful choices. Like, the concept of past lives is sort of about, like, we can only do what we choose to do in this one life. Like, or it's not even always about choice, of course, but it's like we have certain paths that it's like there are any paths available to us when we're born, but then ultimately we only have to follow a few. And we can't just go in a different direction and come back to the path that we were on. Like, she has to really commit to herself and the identity that she has chosen as an American, and, you know, with her life with her husband and everything. And so I feel like that movie was just so achingly real. Like, it felt very genuine. And what my husband said after we watched Materialists is that it felt like someone said to her, okay, make Past Lives but more palatable for a wider audience. So get some really high status celebrities, make it really pretty and about being rich, and we'll just make a ton of money on this. Because it feels like the same movie, but shallower, really. Like, it feels like the same movie, but more of a fantasy. Whereas Past Lives felt very real in a very romantic and beautiful way. Materialists felt, I think a Hallmark movie for the A24 crowd is just such an apt way of describing it, because it really is that fantasy of, it's the same fantasy as the Notebook, right? Where it's like, you can have this sort of rich guy who's, like, good on paper, and maybe you don't feel that much chemistry with, or you can go back to the ex who's, like, always held a torch for you and, like, doesn't have much to offer except that love. But yeah, it's like there's so many of these movies that kind of they have this propaganda, I think, that says you should go for the ex-boyfriend who has nothing to offer you but his love, right? Which is not enough, honestly.
No.
Like, and again, I'm speaking from a little bit of a cynical perspective here. And I believe in love. I think love is really important and really interesting. I also, you know, I'm someone that has a lot of those ex-boyfriends who weren't necessarily broke, but, you know, there was like a draw to them, but often that draw would be based on my attachment wounds, which we can talk about more. And then the person that I chose to be my husband is the one who was reliable, trustworthy, who loved me very consistently. He never pulled away. And my attachment wounds found that off-putting, right? It's like my attachment wounds would say, like, what do you mean he loves me? Like, there must be something wrong with him. I'd rather go after this guy whose love feels really tenuous and I have to keep fighting for it and working for it. Whereas the sort of stable guy who, like, has a lot more to offer, like, he had his love to offer and his kindness to offer, but he also had, you know, commitment to offer and shared values to offer and, you know, definitely a stable job to offer and other things. And, you know, I think that the materialist perspective does have to factor in a little bit, which again is maybe a bit of a cynical view. But when my husband and I got married, we literally wrote and signed a contract together that went through not just I promise to love you forever, but like we are going to have children together. You know, we agree that Rob is going to, you know, do this with his career so that we can do that together as, you know, and we commit to doing these things to maintain our health and wellness and our relationship wellness and stuff like that. Like, we wrote down all of these points to be like, this is what we're promising each other, right? And that has served us, I think, in a lot of ways, because it was a really mindful way to enter into the contract that marriage is. Because if you're going to be with somebody for, you know, hopefully till the end, you know, you need to be clear on what it is that you're getting into here, right? So I also listened to that little interview with Celine Song on the Modern Love podcast, and it was interesting to me that she said, you know, really the purpose of the movie, or the theme of the movie, is that dating is difficult and love is easy. So after watching that movie, I was wondering, like, okay, what was this movie about? What did it mean, right? And what if this movie is really cynical? What if this is a dystopian tragedy or horror movie about dating, right? Because it's like horrible out there. And there's a moment where she and John are talking about, you know, how the whole dating game works and how her career works and so on. And she's like, well, you know, people get together because they have shared socioeconomic status and shared, you know, backgrounds, cultural backgrounds and whatever it is. And he says, so, you know, growing up poor and having a shitty family, you and I must be soulmates. Or like, do you think we're soulmates? And she's like, yeah, probably. And so the fact that she, spoiler alert, ends up with John in the end, to me felt so cynical, because it was like, you know, she couldn't, for whatever reason, be with someone who wasn't in alignment with her in that way. She had to end up with the person who had the shared shitty family and growing up poor and whatever else he listed. You know, that cynical destiny of like, it is just the math. It's not about the love, right? And so I was thinking that would be an interesting comment to make, you know, about dating and so on, like if this movie was really quite cynical. And so it disappointed me a bit that Celine Song was saying like the meaning of this movie is that love is easy, because I foundationally disagree with that. You know, I think crushing is easy, you know, being attracted to someone is easy, but loving someone, I really ascribe to Bell Hooks's perspective that love is a verb. It's something that you do. It's an action that you take. It's something that you commit to and you keep choosing, especially if you're in long-term relationship. I mean, you know, when I think about what Rob and I have been through, you know, over the last even 5 years, like miscarriages, you know, having one kid, more miscarriages, having a baby, like changes in our bodies, like, you know, something that, you know, I'm just in my postpartum body right now, and it feels so different to me than like what I looked like when he and I, especially when we were first dating, when I was in university and I was like a little twig of a person, you know, and same for him. Like, we've both aged, you know, we've been through these things. Like, it's not the way we love each other. It's evolved so far beyond the initial attraction that we had to each other when we were like making out when the lights went on at 4 a.m. in the club in Montreal. It's like, you know, kind of how we got together initially, right? And now it's like, okay, we have to talk about money, you know, we have to talk about how we're going to handle these kids, like behavioral issues. We talk all the time too about how the kids trigger our traumas from childhood and like how to work that out and all that stuff. And there was a moment in past lives actually that we both really appreciated, where Nora meets her childhood sweetheart. She comes back from spending the day with him. She talks to her American husband about it, and they have a really honest conversation of him being like, are you attracted to him? Like, how do you feel about that? And she's like, I don't know how I feel, but like he's masculine in this way. I think he's attractive, and you know, it's confusing for me. Like, she really shares her feelings with him, and I feel like my husband and I have been able to have those kinds of conversations where we can say, you know, whether it's I feel attracted to this person, or, you know, here's what I think about monogamy, or like, you know, we can have these sort of complex conversations without freaking out and having these, you know, big jealous arguments or something like that. So I feel like that was a portrayal of a real relationship, you know, that was quite loving. And I just didn't feel like there was much of that in Materialists. I felt like every conversation she had with any man was literally just continuing to do her job and ask questions about their, you know, what they wanted in a relationship, and naming where she landed in that and where they landed in that. Like, they never had a conversation that was deeper than just like what her work was and dating. So anyway, I feel really like betrayed by this movie. I wanted it to be a dystopian horror because that was the way that I could be like, okay, I can get the soul of this movie. But if this was really an earnest perspective on love, I feel manipulated by it. I feel like it continues to
Yeah.
be that broke ex-boyfriend slash patriarchy slash male loneliness epidemic slash, you know, I don't know how women should be searching for love in this world, like, you know, maybe
Hmm.
dating app propaganda. Like I feel like it was just so much was sold to me, and none of it, I'm not buying any of it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I agree. I was thinking too of this kind of bookend image of the cave person, which I was like, what? Like, I was like, are we gonna unpack this? And we didn't. It was just left as like, and this is the moment that a cave man tied a flower into a ring and gave it to his cave woman wife, these characters who, were sort of depicted in a stereotypical way and who didn't speak any words. And it was beautifully acted. The connection was gorgeous. Like there is something that Celine Song does really well, which is capture actors being alive and vulnerable. But yeah, the story of like, and then he put this flower daisy on her finger and then they were married. I was like, no, marriage was actually a business transaction strictly. To marry for love came in what was called specifically the Romantic Age. Like, let's not skew history. That felt very like Cosmo Girl propaganda to me, like 90s as propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, yeah, I was like, what are we saying? And yeah, I was sort of, when I saw it at the beginning, I was like, we better challenge that. And then we didn't. And I was like, ew, ew. And at the end, I don't know if you stayed through the credits, but at the end, in the city hall where you're seeing all these people get married, the two cave people do come in and sit down and get a marriage license. Like, I think it was just kind of a weird kind of filmic sort of comedic moment. That was the 2% calm or whatever of the
Right.
rom-com. But yeah, I really resented that. I really do. Again, like I stress that it's like this is a false choice for a woman like Lucy who like Dakota Johnson, beautiful woman, like exquisite features, gore in her gorgeous silver jewelry and her gorgeous, gorgeous like New York outfits, like all of her little looks. I was like, yes, like come on. Those like she was in that blazer with the tights. I was like, I'm loving this. She looks so beautiful and like so put together. For her only options to be ultra wealthy, completely broke boyfriend with whom she doesn't like. I think what she discovered and what I again like on this topic of betrayal, betrayal by the story itself, like, she discovered in that fight that they had in the middle of the street that they fundamentally disagreed on what was valuable to them, and it's like I think it's okay for somebody to say, let's, even if we don't have a lot of money, let's save some money and treat ourselves to not the falafel cart. So for her to end up at the falafel cart or whatever it was, the shawarma cart or whatever, like I just feel like that is like, what is she sacrificing in herself? Like, is she getting enough from this person to make that sacrifice? And it's like, yeah, we don't want to have this huge lengthy checklist of like, we can see how materialistic, we can see how entitled that can be, but it's like there is a negotiation of all of those things. There's a reality of like, you know, the I can't even think of it right now because I'm just feeling so asexual that I'm just like I can't even like imagine what that would be. Like I don't even know. But like I'm like, what would be something I'd negotiate? At this point, zero. Zero which is maybe a bit of an extreme. It's like,
And,
I'm
you
like,
know, maybe a bit of like why we're getting this propaganda, right? Because I feel like
yeah.
I've seen quite a few things out there too where the reality is a lot of, you know, women, I guess is what they're talking about, are not getting married or they're getting married much later because women are recognizing like, oh, I actually don't have to sacrifice anything of my life and I can make this work really well on my own. Like the only reason to get married and have children would be if you want to, right? Like they're
Yeah.
like for so many generations of our lives, women have had to get married because there was no other way to make money. Like you just were financially dependent on a man. That still happens in a lot of ways because there's still wealth disparity. And, you know, if you want to have children, you need some sort of help doing that. You can't completely do it on your own, right? But beyond that, you know, there are a lot of women choosing choosing to not bother.
Yeah.
And the male loneliness epidemic, like it's all sort of wrapped in with that. It's sort of women's empowerment, coming out from behind marriage and other things, like finding the power to say, I actually don't have to stay with you if you don't treat me the way I want you to. Like, I can make my own money. I can make my own life work the way that I want it to. I don't even have to define myself as a woman if I don't want to, right? Like, I could define myself in my own ways. Like, all of these things are so empowering for women, people who've, been socialized as women, or however you define it. And then there's this male loneliness epidemic, which is so wrapped up within men, or patriarchy, maybe not individual men, but like that sort of concept of the idea that men should be entitled to women's bodies, that should be entitled to, women's time, attention, childcare, like all of those things. And because men are saying, we want those things from you, and women are saying, no, actually, you can't have it. They're lonely. And you're like, okay, maybe we need to like, co-evolve a little bit here, right?
Yeah, like you might be able to just get some fucking friends. I don't know. Or like maybe like opt for a genuine connection. This is making me think of like times that I've been on these dates with men, and like even in my evolution of my sexuality, like where I was like, wait, I think I'm bisexual. And I often for a long time misconstrued the thrill of like men paying attention to me for like attraction, that those relationships often ended really badly because I personally experienced no attraction or interest in men, in these cisgender he hims out here, like I was just like, I don't, it's not actually for me. But a lot of like, because of the time that I grew up and like the way that I was socialized and like all of these things, like the desire to get that validation from men was like embedded in me, and I've had to actively like break away from that. And it's like my sexuality, like coming to like understanding myself as a lesbian and just being like, oh no, I do enjoy the thrill of like men finding me attractive. Like that is actually very funny for me and fun, because I'm like, haha, gotcha, tricked ya. Like it was something that growing up queer and deeply closeted and mortified and terrified of being outed, like this idea that like, if I could just get a man to be with me, then I will be safe, And now I'm like, wait, I don't need that. And I think that we actually really saw that in both of these men in this movie, in Materialists, where it's like Chris Evans' character,
John.
Like some guy.
Such a basic name, you can't remember it.
It's called him Guy. Like that should have been his name.
Yeah. But yeah, not much to him. Yeah.
Not much to him. So like for him in the relationship, it's like, what is he offering other than maybe some tension? Which she had zero tension with Harry, and Harry, like, you're right. We always saw them talk about was her being like, this is weird for me to be here. And like, you're a unicorn and who am I? And I don't really date and blah, blah, blah. So it's like neither of them really have we don't really see the foundational like connection between her and these characters. I was also interested to know more about, Lucy's attachment wounds. Like we didn't really understand, what her family was like, other than that singular mention from John where he says, both of us come from these poor, broken families or whatever. And I'm like, wait, like I want to know more about why this woman is picking this guy. Like I'm just like, because I feel like that's maybe feeding more into an attachment wound. It's like, I do appreciate the desire for somebody to fight for you, to fight for the relationship. I think that is often missed in the materialist kind of dating, where it's just like, well, somebody should check all my boxes and we should never fight and everything should be fine. I dated somebody for a long time who believed that. And the second there was conflict, he was unable to, like, he just disappeared, Whereas with Harry, it's like there was zero conflict, but there was also like, apart from Pedro Pascal and Dakota Johnson having like gorgeous actor chemistry, I did feel like these as people, I don't understand it. Like, I'm just like, I don't like, they're again, like this is a man who has everything he wants. So he doesn't really have this conflict. And then I'm like, okay, so then what happens? Like, I don't know, like both of it felt very surface level to me in terms of like imagining what a relationship looks like. And I mean, men just are they struggle to like be people, frankly, to be people, three-dimensional people who are interested in connecting with three-dimensional people as well. Like, I think men in general, you know, under patriarchy, all of these things, y'all don't know how you think about anything. Y'all don't have opinions that other people haven't had before.
Yeah. Another reason I felt a little betrayed by this movie actually is how wooden and hollow all of the characters were, really. Like, they were just so empty on the inside. They all felt very tropey. And I wonder if part of it is that Dakota Johnson, like, she's so beautiful, you know, in sort of a Hollywood alien kind of way. Like the scene where she's stalking the woman who was sexually assaulted, and she's been told not to get in touch with this woman, and she shows up in a literal trench coat and baseball cap. If you pass that woman, like Dakota Johnson, in a baseball cap and trench coat, just like wrapped around her tiny body like 5 times because there's just nothing there,
so
you know, like you would look at that person and be like, who's that alien in a trench coat? Like, she's so
Goldberg head ass.
Exactly. Yeah. But like she's uncannily beautiful. Like she's on this other realm, the way a lot of American Hollywood actors are, where they're so perfect looking that actually you'd have a hard time relating to them on the human realm, because you're just like, you look actually quite strange in the human context because you're so perfect and symmetrical, right? And so I wonder if part of my problem with this movie is that I have a really hard time relating to Dakota Johnson. Like, she's just so perfect and beautiful, and the way she acts, I feel like she might do well as like the straight man to some sort of comedic character, because she's so deadpan in all of her delivery. Like, even in interviews and stuff, it's just the way she speaks is very deadpan. And so it was kind of hard to like her or get a sense of why she was interesting or what was unique about her. It just felt like there wasn't that much there. And one of the things that I really appreciated about Past Lives was how beautifully it expresses male vulnerability, and masculinity in a way that's really multifaceted, right? Like, there's this scene that I found just as affecting the second time as the first time, maybe more than a year ago, I guess, whenever it was that I watched it, where Haesung is waiting for Nora in, you know, wherever they're supposed to meet in New York, and he's got his cute little backpack on, and he's just, it's this long shot of him just like, what do I do with my hands? Like, where do I look? Like, you can see how nervous he is to meet this woman that he has all of these, like, you get the sense that they're quite complex feelings. Like, it's not just like, I love you and I'd cross the ocean for you. Like, you're not always totally clear what he thinks those feelings are, but there's just something that draws him to her, and he names a lot of the time, like, different reasons why he thinks she's so interesting and why he wants to spend time with her and all of these things. And you can see, you know, the way he relates to Arthur, her husband, and he's quite tender and quite vulnerable as well. Like, I thought that movie was interesting because, you know, you learn all about Haesung and Nora's relationship, and you're kind of shipping them. And then you meet her husband, Arthur, and like, he's nice enough, and you see his book signing, and he's written a book called Boner, and you really expect him to be this sort of American idiot that you'll just be like, yeah, cheat on him, like, break up with your husband and, you know, get with the hot, you know, guy from your ex-boyfriend or whatever. But then as you get to know Arthur, you see he's very tender. He's very thoughtful. He's very intuitive. You know, he listens to her really carefully. He really cares about how she feels. He can name how he feels. Like, I feel like that movie is so much more how I've experienced men, right, in my life. Like, the men that I know, the men that I care about, the men that I'm married to, the men that I'm friends with. Like, these are human beings, right? Like, they're full human beings, and they have a range of different feelings and emotions. And so much of the time, obviously, women are objectified in Hollywood movies and so on, but I think there are certain ways that men tend to be objectified too. Like, patriarchy likes for us to really be in our gender roles, right? That, like, a good man looks like this, and a good woman looks like that, and like, here's how they interact together, and these are the two that should connect sexually, and anyone else is off the table, right? And I feel like this Past Lives really showed something that was just, it was a lot more human than that. But yeah, just that idea that, like, in movies, you're getting a lot of stereotypes, you're getting a lot of archetypes, you're not always getting really complex representations of people. And I feel like Past Lives did it and Materialists didn't, right?
Yeah.
Because you have Dakota Johnson, who's just like, I'm a hot matchmaker and I don't know what I'm doing with my life and I want to marry someone rich. and maybe I love this guy. And like, that's kind of all you get. And then you have Captain America, John, who's just like, oh yeah, like you need my help. Like he really wants to be the hero, you know, which is just such a basic kind of masculine trope, right? Is like the rescuing ex-boyfriend. And in that moment where, you know, her client is sexually assaulted, she's very upset by that. She calls her ex-boyfriend. Like, this is another one of these movies where I'm like, a lot of this could have been solved if you just had friends. Like, if you had a friend that you could call and be like, hey, friend, like, I'm having this hard day. Here's what I'm going through. That happened in It Ends With Us as well, where she goes through this difficult thing and like she doesn't have a single friend she can call. She just calls her ex-boyfriend. Like, why? Yeah, I feel like he was just like, sure, I'll be your rescuer. And then by the end, I don't know, that whole speech where he's just like, I can't offer you money, I can't offer you shared values, I can't offer you like anything that you might need, but I promise to love you forever. I was just like, oh, like
Ugh.
you can't promise that, you know?
No,
You
you
can't.
can't.
Like you know, and especially if he means I'm gonna feel the feeling of love for you forever. Like actually that's not a thing.
No.
We don't control that. It's mostly chemicals that last max 2 years. And then
Hmm.
after that we're doing the action of love, right? Like there's the love feeling is different, but it's like I'm not gonna I can't promise I'll feel attracted to you or like want to drop everything for you or like the thrill that we feel together because we're not really supposed to be together. Like you can't promise any of that stuff. He showed no evolution. He was
No.
like, I'll pick up a couple extra shifts, but he wasn't saying like, you know, you're sacrificing this for me. I will sacrifice that for you. Like I'll find a way to have a more sustainable job while I continue to pursue acting or whatever. It's like there was no complexity to how he was doing that. And I mean, you're someone that is an actor and you're also trying to make your life work. And we've talked many times about like how to do this. What's the best way to do that? Like, how do I make sure that I'm not, you know, living paycheck to paycheck
Paycheck
or
to
whatever,
paycheck.
so that I can actually let my nervous system calm down in between getting jobs, which are so unpredictable. Like that's a whole world, you know, that he was just like, I'm a caterer. And I don't know, he didn't seem that happy with his life, but he wouldn't change anything. And then when during that scene where she's agreeing, she's also talking about quitting her job, which can give her all of the money that she's wanted. And she's like, I don't know if I want that. It's like she collapses into, I'm refusing power that's being offered to me. Like I'm going to be this powerless person and just go with love instead of actually, you know, like taking the job and getting the thing that I need for myself so that I can also pursue this love relationship without sacrificing the other values that are important to me, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so much there. So I really like Dakota Johnson. I find her like extremely charming. I don't know. I think that I have a thing for a cold woman, you know? I like a cold, mean woman. I'm like, yes, please date me. Like I find her in the press, which I find the press has been a lot more thrilling to watch than the movie itself.
I
We
have
always
to
gotta have
agree.
one of
I've
those.
enjoyed the interviews a lot. And Pedro Pascal, too. Like, I feel like he just showed up to this movie and phoned it right in. Like, there just wasn't much going on with that character. But you watch him in an interview and you're like, Pedro Pascal, tell me more. Like, I love it.
Yeah,
And her, too. Like, I found her quite funny in the interviews and, like, more fun
she's
to watch
so
in those than
yeah.
in the movie.
Yeah, I find her so charming. I feel like she was a bit like let down by this character in a way that is like the character is not really like the character is being led by other people. I think that there is a story that should have been more developed with her connection to that world where it was like what happens is in the movie, one of her clients gets sexually assaulted, and the way that she finds out is she first calls the guy, and he's like, "Yeah, maybe I'll see her again. I don't know if it's serious." Like he's kind of doing one of these douchebag kind of responses, and she's just like, "Okay, whatever." But yay, he finally wants to see her favorite client again, and then the favorite client is ghosting her, and then eventually she finds out through a private meeting with her boss that the woman is was sexually assaulted and that she's suing the matchmaking company. And not just that this is a one time off, but this happens a lot. It seems like as what does she call it? Like a hazard of the trade, essentially. That they're used to that, and that was very shocking for Lucy. Like for her to be like, wait, like this isn't the first time this has happened. Like no, like this can't be happening. And the fact that all of that, you know, defining and filtering out of people into these like materialistic identifiers of career, height, blah, 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 you're still not able to get a sense of who that person is or the kind of person that will sexually assault someone, which we all understand that to be true. We know that a lot of the times it's not this villainous guy who's like, dun, 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 dun. Sometimes it is, and that's fucking awful. But sometimes it's somebody that you would not, or that was your friend or whatever, right? So it's like, it's not something that you can tangibly glean from a singular conversation about what they're dating, what their dating is going to be. And so I thought that was one of the most interesting, like, pieces of this story was Lucy having the paradigm shift of like this thing that she's good at. Maybe she's not good at it. Maybe she doesn't want to be involved in it in any way because there's this real risk that is dangerous and terrifying, and which is a risk of like that happens when people date, using Tinder and stuff too. And so I felt like her choosing not to proceed in the career, even though it would give her this money. I didn't really understand how Lucy felt about that. Like her being like, I don't know, maybe like on her little phone. Oh my God, I'm such a millennial. I mean, my phone like this is how the phone is. And for anybody watching, it's this, I swear, it's just one brick. It's not the pinky and the thumb. Miming. But like her on the phone being like, I don't know if I'll take it. And she's kind of like joking about it, and then meets her now boyfriend, Chris Evans, in the park. So I thought it was like, it was interesting because, I do feel like it's a good choice for her to leave that career. It seems like it was preventing her from like genuinely connecting with people, with making friends. Like I loved the storyline of how, I mean, yeah, she stalked that person and it's very unprofessional and a little messed up. And Joe Goldberg, with her little baseball hat, but like even just for the plot of like, there's, this woman needed a fucking friend, like she needed a person to talk to. But yeah, I think that it's an interesting choice for her to not go back to that career. But I didn't like how it was framed and sort of like coached in this like, and she's gonna marry, like what, her catering theater, off-Broadway theater actor boyfriend is gonna support the two of y'all now? Like, no. Y'all are gonna have to move out of New York, by the way, because you can't afford to live there anymore if you don't make that money. Also, I don't think you can really afford New York at $70,000 a year, let's be honest. But yeah. It's very expensive there. But
not with her wardrobe.
Yeah, you're saying bye to that wardrobe, girl. You're going to the thrift shop now. But I do feel like the tone of the piece, where it failed for me is like Past Lives. It was so quiet. It was so subtle, but there was so much going on that moment at the end of Past Lives, spoiler. Oh my God, what a brilliant fucking shot. Oh my God, it's just one of the best films I've seen in a while, where it's like Greta Lee walks him to his Uber, and then as she's walking back, she completely breaks down, and you're waiting for that release the whole movie. It's like, it's building, it's building, it's building. And you can see it in her eyes, in Greta Lee's eyes. Like you can see it building in her, this world of collapse, of like grief, but also it's complicated grief. It's like all these things. Whereas I felt like, Dakota Johnson was a little shortchanged by this character. She didn't get to have this whole inner life. Like the tension, the silence didn't work as much for me because there wasn't much of a foundation for it. Like I was like, what are the stakes here? Like I didn't really understand that. Like what was the cost other than you sacrificing like your whole life, which is, I feel, a very 90s, early 2000s ideology of like, I don't really see anybody doing that. Like that's not realistic to me. Nobody, especially Lucy is 35. So she's like pretty much my age. And I'm like, our generation isn't doing that. Like, I really don't see that happening.
My husband and I were talking about, what would have happened next in this movie, right? Like, there's a world in which John becomes a famous actor, and he, really comes into money, and he becomes, the rich guy that she's always wanted. And that's a fairy tale, right? That's the frog that you kiss that becomes the prince, or was the prince all along, right? That you like married him for love, but it turned out that he had money. There's a world in which she does take that job, because she doesn't exactly she doesn't seem to have decided, like at the end of the movie on the phone. She's saying like, I'll think about it, right? Like she doesn't actually make a final choice there. So there's a world in which she does take that job and she's the breadwinner and she makes all the money. And then there are power dynamic issues that come into that relationship where she's the one who's always bringing in the money and he's never bringing it in. And that can create issues, right, on either side. There's a world where the two of them are just poor, like really poor. And it creates the same fights that they had before. And then they break up the same way that they did the first time because nothing has actually changed, right? Like, I think that there's more interesting things to say potentially about what would have happened next in that situation, right?
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Like somebody in that TikTok was like, why didn't he just commit to making it as an actor? I'm like, that's actually what it looks like to try and make it as an actor. What he's doing, that's actually what it looks like. Also, he's a Broadway theater actor, so the money he's getting isn't the Chris Evans Captain America money, okay? So, yeah, that's the reality of what it is. And I talked a bit about that at the beginning, but like, that's the reality of what it means to be an actor. And if you want to do this, you are making a lot of sacrifices. And it's like, yeah, like, what does that look like for Lucy, who is used to her? Does she have a 1-bedroom apartment? We only got a glimpse of it. I was like, she's living on her own in New York in that salary. Like, that's a pretty big deal, So like, what does that look like for them to blend their lives together? Like, it's a different kind of life that you have to kind of imagine outside of the confines of, or outside of the fantasy rather of Harry and billions of dollars and, let's go to Iceland or wherever they were going to go.
Yeah. Another, thing that I saw on the internet was that this movie was big rich trying to sell more poor. Which I thought was I
love that. Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was a great way of putting it. And maybe from that perspective, like, again, if somebody just tapped Celine's song and they were just like, make past lives, but make more money, make it richer, that person was just like, $80,000 a year before taxes. That sounds like a real person's salary, right? Like in New York with Dakota Johnson's outfits in this movie. Like, no, actually, guys, that's not what that is, right?
Yeah.
So, it may have been someone way out of touch trying to pick a salary that she interestingly names. Like, she didn't have to in the movie, but it actually is named.
Yeah, oh my God, that's so real. Big Rich trying to, yeah, it's just like, just shut up and be happy with Chris Evans. Don't you want to fall in love and you both be broke ass bitches in the service industry? Just shut up and go over there. We don't want you in our Pedro Pascal mansions.
Yeah. Totally. Stay in your place, right? I mean, stay in your place. That's kind of what, in a way that it says, because, she grew up poor, so did Chris Evans. Are we meant for each other? Are we soulmates? Yes, probably. And yeah, in the end they are. And her wedding ring, her engagement ring is a fucking flower. I don't think she would really like that, right? Yeah, so it's kind of saying like, if you're born into a certain class, you stay there. And you should like that, and you should find that to be romantic, and you should think that it's like going back to your roots, as opposed to, that sort of American ideal of pulling up your bootstraps and becoming, this great fantasy that you can become, that anyone can become rich in America, which is not true. Like, there are a lot of reasons why people who are born poor stay poor, and people who are born rich just get richer. Like, and in Canada too, in a lot of places it works like that. Money begets more money. So there's a real stuckness about class in a lot of these places. And I feel like that movie was romanticizing, stay in your lane.
Yeah, 100%. Like, you don't need all this fancy stuff. No, what you actually want the falafel cart. Yeah, go over there. You got to see a look inside these fancy restaurants. That's all you need to see. There's nothing really going on there.
Yeah.
You fucking poor loser.
When he put that little flower ring on her hand, I was like, oh, okay, that's a cute gesture, but where's the real ring?
Like, he'll get her a ring. She's wearing gorgeous silver jewelry the whole movie, the whole time. I was like, ooh, yeah, she kind of is a cool winter. Yeah, I could see that for her. With the silver, it looked really nice.
Right.
I was like clocking that jewelry. You're not even gonna get her.
Yeah, she was beautiful.
Zirconia?
Which even that, right? I feel like even if it was a cubic zirconia, like more than a daisy, please. Like, like something with some permanence, which again, maybe from that cynical point of view, which this movie doesn't seem to be that, but if this was a tragedy, if this was a dystopian horror movie, then that symbol would have been perfect, because it's like, I, Chris Evans, have nothing to offer you except my love, and that is symbolized by a flower which will wilt and die very quickly. Right? I'm not even going to give you a cubic zirconia that lasts a while. Like,
yeah, now that's
I don't know.
movie.
I feel like you could read the movie that way and just see horror in it. You know, like you could really see horror in it, and in some of the details are really there for that.
Oh my
right?
God. Yeah, somebody's got to supercut that. We're going to need these Gen Zs to come out and supercut this to make it an A24 horror movie. And let's see the scream music over top of her being like, I can't be with you. And then you hear that music. Dun, 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 dun.
Well, A24's Midsummer, right?
Yeah, I think
like
so, yeah.
A24 has had some great horror movies, no?
Great horror movies.
Like, it's not a rom-com studio, is it?
I think that they do a lot of, like, art. Well, they're sort of like they've become very popular in the last few years with, I would say more mainstream. I don't want to say popular, that's probably the wrong characterization, but more mainstream, I think, because of movies like Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like, that was A24, and I think it kind of skyrocketed them. That's why I think also when you see that it's A24, I'm like, where's the twist? Where's the deep nuance? Where's the cut in there that is going to plummet me to, like, grief or terror or just something that completely blows it all up?
Give me a feeling, like, any feeling. Yeah. Aside from betrayed by this movie.
I'll take any of it.
That's the twist. That's the twist. This movie's
like,
a betrayal. In and of itself.
This is what it really is the betrayal of heteronormativity and how subscribing to, you know, and again, like I did mention this at the beginning, it did make me think of like trad wife culture, which is this kind of subsect of culture that you're seeing on TikTok with like, it's just like women who, like, I think her name is Nara Smith, who like hand make cereal for their kids, and it's becoming this like trend to kind of be submissive, but not in a kink way. You know what I mean? I'm like, it's one thing to be submissive and like you're choosing it and you're aware of the power dynamics, but I heard someone characterize it as like you're taking the consent out of kink and just becoming submissive without the real like awareness around it. And you know, so right? I'm like, oof, yes. And yeah, it's like this kind of like, and here we are, I'm soothing you by making my 25 children handcrafted Cheerios, and like I look extremely beautiful, and I only put boop 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 3 blops of makeup on, and I'm gonna wear an apron, and da 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 da. It's like very smooth brain for the aspiring heteronormative person, and that it feels a bit like propaganda for that, where it's like
it is
just
yeah. I mean, I feel like that's one of the examples of like the pushback against. I mean, there's different ways of looking at this, but the fall of patriarchy, really. Yeah. Like, I feel like there are a lot of ways in which patriarchy is under threat right now. And that's why certain things are rising up from beneath, you know, like incels and some of what's going on with politics in America and abortion rights and all of those things, because we are in an era where women and queer people and trans people and non-binary people are more powerful than they've ever been before. And specifically, trans and non-binary people are saying, I don't have to do it that way. I don't have to do it that heterosexual way where things are binary, literally, right? Where it's like it has to be this one thing or the other thing. And this is where the power has to lie, and so on. Like, if you refuse to be a gender, you're refusing one of the patterns of patriarchy, right? Like, that's kind of a foundation of what it is. And so the trad wife and this movie, you know, it is propaganda. And a lot of the, I've seen some stuff too about how like extreme thinness is back as well in models and so on, because, when thinness is being sold to women in this way, where, you know, this is what it means to be feminine, this is what it means to be beautiful, this is what it means to be sexually valuable in the market and the dating market, those people will count calories, obsess about dieting, possibly have eating disorders, and if they're successful at all of those things, become weak in their bodies. All of those things turn down our executive functioning in our brains. If we're not eating enough food, we can't think straight, which means we can't fight the power. Which is like,
Yes. Oh my
kind of a
gosh.
basic way of saying it, but it's true.
No, totally. I remember, like, this just sparked to my mind. When I used to teach dance, and I have short hair, and I at the time still had like a short pixie cut. It was probably a little more feminine than my current mullet situation, which is growing in nicely. But at the time, I remember I was teaching, and like little girls who take ballet, I think are very interested in femininity, and so having a teacher with short hair might have been, not what they were expecting out of that whole situation. And I remember this girl, she had long hair, like to her knees. I mean, she was very short, but like she had long hair, like very long hair. And she was just like, "Why do you have short hair?" Like how little kids, like, they're kind of annoyed and they're mad at you because you're different. And I was just
Right.
like, "Oh, I have it because I like it." And I was like, "Why do you have long hair?" Trying to dispel any, like, there. I feel no shame about that question, so you don't have
Right.
to either. Let's just open this dialogue with the child. So I was like, like, "Why do you have long hair?" And she sat there and she thought about it for a minute. She was like, "Well, if I ever go into a cave, I would like to be able to find my way out." It's like, I
Tangled
love
style.
that she wasn't like, "It's pretty." Like, I think that she was just like, "No, there's a utilitarian feature to this."
You know what? This is a bit of a tangent, but I'll share it. My friend Madison Myatt writes a Substack, like a newsletter that I subscribe to, and she told this story about how her child, who I think is 5 or 6, they were out somewhere, and he said, "Mama, you're way fatter than Dada. You're way fatter than Papa. How come you're so much fatter than the other moms or whatever?" Like, he was really, pushing this question. And
Yeah.
she really tries to be weight neutral and all of those things and just, kind of chill about it. But at the time she was quite upset, and like both her and her son's dad were like, "Shh, like, it's, that's not okay to say that," or whatever it is. So later on, when she was feeling a bit calmer, he brought it up again, and he was like jiggling her leg, and he was like, "Mama, you're so fat," or something like that. And she was more able to say, like, "Okay, what does that mean?" And he's like, "Well, it means you're puffy and you're bigger." And she's like, "Well, is that good or bad? Like, how do you feel about that?" And he said, "Well, it means that you're very strong. It's good because you can be very strong and you can lift a lot more things than Dada." And like, she realized that when he said that the first time, it was because she had just carried both children in a backpack down a flight of stairs, and like her partner had been like, "I'm not doing that. Like, that's gonna hurt my back." And so her little son is like, fatter means stronger. Like, obviously that's way better. And so he was asking, like, why are you so much stronger than Papa? But using this languaging, and she was just like, wow, it's my internalized fat bias that heard it that way. And that actually
Yeah.
wasn't what he meant by it at all. And that story is just really sticking with me because, as I said, like, my postpartum body and all that, like, I'm just kind of dealing with that, like, how I want to feel about my body, including some of this awareness of what we were just talking about with, like, being sold thinness. And I don't want to go down a path where I'm like counting every calorie and obsessing about the food I'm eating and how much I'm exercising and all that stuff. You and I have talked in our podcast about the substance. We both have some disordered eating,
Yeah.
as children of the 90s, growing up, hearing that, like, Britney Spears is so fat or whatever it is. Like, it just, we have a lot of this internalized fat bias that's, like, hard to fight against. And some of it is propaganda, because if women aren't, or people aren't allowed to be like the shapes that their bodies naturally want to be, then it really occupies our minds in a direction other than evolution, change, making money, gaining power, like all of those things. Like, it makes us less powerful if we're obsessing about those things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. At least in the Hallmark world, the thing about Hallmark that I've learned is that the characters in Hallmark all have secure attachments. That's what they told me. A person who taught a workshop, and I got to listen in on it. And I was like, that is a revolutionary way of reading this script, because I think a lot of the time you see the scripts and you're like, why am I not doing indie A24, like, drama, Tennessee Williams, everyone's drunk and angry? Like, you look at the script and it is a bit like, okay, everyone just kind of seems happy. But if you take it to mean, yeah, people experience tragedy, they experience feelings, they're not like robots. We're not doing like Pleasantville here. but these are just people with secure attachments. I'm like, yeah, we're not
Wow.
exactly used to that, as like dramatic little actors. And I mean, at least like when you're watching a Hallmark, it's like you kind of know what you're getting in for, you kind of know what you're going to expect when you see the busy working woman come to the small town, and fall in love with the charming brooding man who has now taken over the neighborhood bakery or whatever. Like the plot is. To summarize the plot of every Hallmark, you're welcome. But like, like I feel like at least when you're watching that, you like kind of know what to expect,
Yeah.
and you get to see these cute, quirky little characters, and there's some real comedy in there, to be honest.
And that was basically the plot of Materialists, right? It's this busy working woman
100%.
who had other things to do, who ends up falling in love with, whoever it is, both of these guys in a way.
Some
But yeah,
guy.
thank you for bringing back attachment, because there was a piece I wanted to talk about there, which is that from an attachment perspective, this is a tragedy, right? Like, this is a piece that I really thought about as I was thinking about my own history as well, which is that, as you mentioned, she has this shitty childhood. We don't really know what that is. We don't really know what that means. But we do know that our attachment styles that we learn in childhood tend to come back in our adult romantic relationships. Like, we tend to replay the wounds that we got in childhood in an attempt for our systems to heal those wounds, right? And so it's interesting that she has this experience where Pedro Pascal, if we look at it from a certain perspective, he's not only rich, he's also a lot of other things, right? And I feel like the moment where they're talking about love and she says, love is easy, and he says something like, you find love easy? Like, I think it's the most difficult thing in the world.
Mm.
From the perspective of the idealistic movie, that's him saying, I'm incapable of love, or like, I don't love you, or I don't have love, or whatever it is. From a more realistic perspective, he's actually saying the truth, which is that love is incredibly difficult, right? And that maybe he's been hurt before, and maybe he's been through some hard things. Like, that's a realistic way of looking at love, is that it is incredibly difficult. It's something that I want, and I want to learn how to do it, and I want to try. And his perspective is like, I want to try this with you. Like, I want to figure out how to love with you. And it might just be me, but when they had that conversation where she said, I don't love you and you don't love me either, I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? This is news to me. Like, do you not enjoy each other's company? Like, what's happening?
Yes.
And then there's
Like
this
when
moment where
he's
he's like, I've never loved before, or something like that. And
I was just gonna say, like when he's at the after party of the opening of the play, and he's just being kind and charming to everyone, and he can get along with everyone, and he's gonna pick up the tab. Like, he's a generous person. He's really kind. He seems to mesh well with her. Like, even if she does decide, oh, I want to stay friends with John and his actor friends, like, it doesn't seem like he's bothered by that. He doesn't seem to be this like elitist who's like, I can't hang out with these people, So it's like, what
not
do
at
you mean
all.
you
Yeah.
can't love him? Like, what's
And there
wrong
was a
with
bit
this
of a
guy?
juxtaposition too, yeah, of like her finding out that her client had sexually assaulted her other client or whatever it is. And I feel like there was a moment where you recognize she went home with Pedro Pascal's character, with Harry. He could have been the same way, right? Like, she didn't know him at all. But I feel like I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like a scene of them in the bed together. It felt very consensual. Like, it felt very
Yeah.
much that he was respecting her space and giving her room. And like, he made her breakfast. He was like, I got to go to work now, but like, you enjoy. And, he was a really lovely person. And I feel like, The Notebook, It Ends With Us, this movie, it's a lot of this attachment wounding place where it's like, I want to go back to that ex-boyfriend because that ex-boyfriend triggers those attachment wounds in me and triggers the thrill that you were talking about before, of like the thrill of gaining a man's attention, or like having a man be attracted to you, because it feels tenuous. It feels like something that you aren't necessarily going to have all the time, right? And so I feel like
Yeah.
for me, I had many of those experiences of like being really attached to a certain boyfriend or ex-boyfriend whose attention felt inconsistent, who felt like it was hard for me to get this person's attention. And I thought I loved them because I put so much energy into like being attractive for them, being sexually available to them, making them think that I was like this cool girl,
Yeah.
or whatever it is. And again, all of that energy that goes into that, it's kind of like the energy that goes into trying to be thin. It was really taking away from who I am, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, my husband, again, was like kind, present. And one of the big things that he was and is supportive. Like, he supports me in the crazy things that I do in my career and so on. Like, he was very excited that he could set up my lighting for me today. You know, he's like, let me set up your lighting. Like, let me show you how to do it. Like, here's the warm and cool or whatever. And I'm like, great, I don't care, but that's cool. Because he's like, your YouTube channel, like, we got to, you know, like, he really supports me. He wants me to be more of who I am. And I feel like that's, you know, one of the definitions of love that I came to for myself when I was doing the research for my book Want, which is about my recovery from sexual assault. And one of the chapters of that is called Love, because it's about getting through that trauma and coming to a place where you can actually receive love. And for me, one piece of it was recognizing that I was confusing passion with anxiety. And the lack of anxiety that I felt with Rob made me break up with him a couple of times, because I was just like, this must not be love, because it feels like, boring isn't quite the right word for it. Maybe that's how I perceived it at the time, but like steady, stable. There's not a lot of drama in our... That's not true. We have drama. Sometimes we have fights or whatever, but we work on them and we continue to evolve. And like, I think we both know, or we're working on knowing, because he has his own attachment wounds too, that like when we fight, we're always going to come back together, and that like we can trust each other to be in conflict, right? Like, that's how love is difficult, is, you know, you're expecting it to feel like how it felt when you were growing up, whatever dynamics were there. But then real love that you're working on and expanding with and so on is like, you have to face some of those attachment wounds, whether it's that it feels boring or it feels scary, or you never say your feelings because, you know, your family or patriarchy taught you as a man you're not allowed to have any of those, right? Or whatever it is. Yeah. And patriarchy teaches women that, you know, you have to be a cool girl and, you know, eat all the hot dogs without gaining any weight, and you know, 90s feminism.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true.
Anyway.
Like, even in the movie, when Harry and Lucy, when she's ending it with him, you do get the sense that this is a man who's just like there for her. This moment, it just reminded me of like the way that you were summarizing it, how we don't really get a sense of like how they are. All we hear them talk about in their relationships is about the relationship. It reminds me of like Love Island, which is like this summer show that happens every year. That it happens in the UK, it happens in the US, and it's just like this really like toxic, messy heterosexuals. It's Love is Blind for the 20-year-old crowd. Like, the only stuff that they choose to air on that show are the moments when they're talking about their relationship, either when they're unhappy or when they're happy in it. And all they ever say is like, we just really, like, we feel the same about, we have so much in common. We feel the same about everything. And I'm like, first of all, no, you don't. Second of all, what though? What do you feel the same about? Like, you haven't shown it to us. So they're just always saying this. And it's always like, wait, my favorite color is also blue. And they're like, I can't believe we're meant for each other. And it's like, they're 20, right? So they're like, I'm so in love. Which is different in the Materialists, where it's like, I want to believe that you don't have feelings for Harry, because I'm like, I'm not sold that you don't, because I haven't seen anything other than you talking about how crazy it is to be in this expensive restaurant. Like, you know.
Yeah, and a lot of what they talk about, and I noticed many characters doing this, is telling the truth about themselves in a harsh way, which, again, to go back to, is this movie actually a dystopian tragedy? You know, Dakota Johnson is constantly arguing against herself in her relationship with Harry. She's always saying, you don't want me, I'm not the right person for you, we don't share this, like, you know, we don't match in the math of the materialist world, or whatever it is. And I feel like that's the attachment wound speaking, right? That's the self-belief that, like, I can't do better than the image I have of myself based on my shitty childhood, right? And like, Chris Evans' character matches her self-belief better than Pedro Pascal Harry would, right? Like, if she believed she were more foundationally lovable, she wouldn't have been sitting around with Harry saying, you shouldn't be with me, right? She would just be like, tell me more about yourself, you know, or here's more about me, right? And like, let's have a conversation. Like, it was just constantly trying to convince him that, you know, they shouldn't be together.
Yes. Okay. And this just sparks something that I also wanted to touch on about this movie, which is the conversation about value. Like, at the beginning, when she goes to the bride and she's like, tell me the reason why you are happy to be here, the reason that you're too humiliated to admit that you would never say, and I would never tell anyone. And then she says, well, he makes my sister jealous. And she goes, he makes you feel valued. And she reframes it as that. Which is like, again, this material. I thought the movie was maybe going to go more in and kind of dig into that. Like, what does it mean to feel valued? And I don't get the sense that Lucy feels valued. Like there is a question of whether she feels valued, whether it's attachment or whatever with Harry. Like, I think that there's more that we didn't really get to see. And then with John, it's like she doesn't feel valued by John because he doesn't really do much for her other than he'll answer the phone whenever she calls, which is just like, but what does he understand your job? Like, I don't know. It's, again, if she had called a woman who was her friend, maybe she would experience value in that friendship, right? Which, again, patriarchy doesn't want women to have friends because that's how the gossip networks happen. That's how, that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, we've had lots to say about this movie. And if you're going to watch anything by Celine Song, I would recommend Past Lives. It's so, so good. And
so good.
I don't know. Would you recommend people watch Materialists? What do you think?
I will say there is a lot of exquisitely shot things. New York is a beautiful city to look at. I think that Celine Song, as an artist of a filmmaker, has a way of composing a shot that I think is stunning. Like the images of like the architecture and like even the last shot when she's kind of in the bottom corner of the screen on the bench and you have all this greenery. It's so juicy. It's so beautiful. Like the images are really lovely. So if you're going to see it, you will, I think if you're a kind of film nerd, like I, want to be, like, I think you might enjoy it. But as a romantic story, it is heteronormative propaganda. Do not recommend that. Or if you do watch it with the lens of like, this is a horror film about betrayal.
Yeah. A dystopian horror film about dating in the current age.
Yeah.
And how dating disempowers us.
Yeah.
Foundationally, because we're all so materialistic. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's a more interesting message.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you as always, Emily, for joining me to have this conversation and sharing a little bit about your history too.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening, everybody, to this episode of Popcorn Therapy with me, Julie Peters, and my guest, Emilee Nimetz, on Materialists and Past Lives, and there were a few other things we brought in there as well. So I hope that you enjoyed it. Please share, like, subscribe, follow, all of those things. This podcast is on YouTube as well as Spotify and some other podcasting platforms, so you can kind of find it wherever you like. And if you would like to leave us a donation, go to juliepeters.ca/tip me. A couple dollars is appreciated. If you do donate $50 or above, I will record you a little tarot reading just for you. You can send me a question if you want, or it can just be an open reading, single card, just for fun. So please feel free to do that. I really appreciate you supporting all of the things that we do over here at Popcorn Therapy. It's just me and my guests doing our thing. So appreciate you listening, and we'll catch up next time.